The biggest thing about learning, when you're learning something, they said, when somebody's speaking, you either look at their mouth or you look at their face. That way you will not forget anything that they said. And I never really, they said it over and over again. You won't forget what they said. So when I started interviewing elders, that's what the first elder told me. You look at their face or their mouth until they're done. You won't forget what they said. You may think you forgot it, but it's somewhere in your brain. And one day when it's going to come to your mind and you're going to be able to tell it. So I worked for 20 years with elders, and the older I got, the more I realized, like when I speak, I remember the things that they say. So that's how I was able to memorize these stories. So that's a good trick. When you're going to school, if an elder's talking, and an elder is a teacher, somebody who's older than you, the way that you learn is by watching and paying attention. And it's really, really true. Watch, you pay attention, and you learn. So the first story that I like telling is one that was told by John Ashikach of Tuksuk Bay. Any connections to Tuksuk Bay? No? You? You smiled. Yeah, so anyway, he told this story, and I just love this story. So one day, Fox was walking along, and it was in the summertime, and it was during the time when geese molt. You guys know what molt is? It's when they lose their feathers, and they can't fly for a while until they grow their new ones. So it was molting season, and Fox was walking along, and pretty soon he sees white-fronted goose, just walking along also, can't fly. So he looks over and he's like, ooh, he gets all hungry, right? And he starts running after white-fronted goose, and he says, you guys can sing with me if you want. I don't have a good voice, but I try. So he sings, ah, you na, you na, you na, you na. Ah, you na, you na, you na, you na. He's running fast on all fours, running after the white-fronted goose. Sami, Sarah, Sami, Sarah, Sami, Sami, wah, wah, Sami, Sami. And then he bites on the neck of white-fronted goose, and he catches it. And he's like, I don't want to eat this goose. It's too warm. Its meat is too warm, so he sets it aside, and it's sunny out, so he lays back and waits he's dreaming of eating that goose, and he's singing. Jaturnar jake angayaya, ratbakturna rehiunga angayaya, gemil regnek angayaya. And he opens his eyes, and it's gone. And he looks, and it took off, so he starts running after it again. Ah, yuna, 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 yuna. Ah, yuna, 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 yuna. Sami, and he's getting close. Sami, Sarah, Sami, Sarah. Sami, Sami, wah, wah, Sami, Sami. And of course, he catches it again. He catches up to it and bites it again on the neck, and as if he learned his lesson, he sets it down and he lays back. I don't know there's no lyrics to the song, but in these verses he's saying, oh, I can't wait to eat a big juicy leg. I can't wait to eat it. So that's basically the lyrics of the song. He sings, or I wonder what I'm going to eat. And of course, he wakes up and looks over because it's cooled down, but it had taken off again, and this time it's heading toward a lake. And he starts running after it again with the same song. When I tell this to first graders, they catch on and they start singing. I don't expect you to sing with me, but he sings, ah, yuna, 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 ah, yuna, yuna, and he's running along, yuna, yuna, Sami, Sarah. And right when he's almost getting to it, the goose is getting to the edge of the lake. And he's going faster and faster, and he starts running after it. And it's almost at the edge of the lake. Sami, Sara, Sami, Sara, Sami, Sami, Wah, Wah. And right when he's about to catch it, it just goes down into the lake and swims off. And Red Fox, of course, Gavak is so disappointed, he turns completely red. I turn so red when I turn red. And when I sing, I do too. But he's completely red, and he's so embarrassed, and he's so regretful that he let the white goose go, twice already. So he turned. Oh, back then, I forgot to tell you an important fact. All animals were white at one point, thousands of years ago, or so it's said. And Red Fox was all white. But this time he turned completely red from being so embarrassed, from being so disappointed. And he's like, he walks over to the lake and he looks at himself and he's like, oh my gosh, I look awful. I look so terrible. He's disappointed and he's dejected by how ugly he looks. He starts walking along the side of the lake. And he comes upon a fire pit. And in fire pit, there's charcoal and burnt stuff. So he grabs a piece of charcoal and he starts painting the front of his legs. And then paints a little on the forelegs. And then paints the tip of his ears. And so, of course, he turned all red except for the tip of his tail. So he looks back into the lake and he's like, oh, I don't look so bad after all. So that's how Red Fox became Red Fox. That's the first story. Any questions about it? You're good?
Well, I don't have a question, but I thought it was interesting. You said all animals were white, and that's kind of the same with some blanket stories. Like Raven, he was white, and so were all the other animals. They have stories of how we get their colors.
Yeah, that's true. And then there's even a story in our culture about how Raven painted Loon. I don't know that one because I haven't heard it in person, but I think it's a similar thing with all the other stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, good point.
So, how would the fox cover his legs and ears in charcoal?
He just painted them.
Yeah, just like, was there like any reason or just
Because he didn't like the way he looked all red. And I like to tell this story too because there's always, I tell my kids, I call them my kids, my students, that there's always a way to change your situation, no matter how dejected you feel about how you look or what's going on, he found a way to change that, he was like, oh, I'm going to paint myself. Oh, I don't look so bad anymore. And
yeah, just kind of like mascara and makeup.
Yeah, so that's I always, that's part of the moral, I think, so. And there's my second story is also a shorter story. I heard this from, I think her name is Stephanie Nayaziner of Tununuk. And I really like this story because in our Yupik culture, we believe that you can change the weather. I don't know if you guys know this, that you can actually, there's ways that you can change the weather. Back then, there's lots of stories about it. There's stories about how you can do that today too, that, our minds are pretty powerful. And there's an elder who told a story of going to Good News Bay, I think it was, and they were stuck there. They were from Quinnahock, and they were stuck there for 2 days because the storms were so bad. And then he remembered what his grandma said. His grandma said, build a little boat, makeshift boat, like make it look like your boat, let it float off and burn it. And once you burn it, the weather will clear up. And he did that, and he said it worked. So, and when I was younger too, I was told that I could change the weather. You know, when you're going through certain rites of passage, like when I became a woman, they said, this year, in this whole year, if the weather is bad, you can change the weather. And I've seen a weather changing ceremony before by my older cousin. But anyway, I love this story because there's a lot of grandma and grandkid stories in Yupik culture. So there was a grandma with her grandson living close to the mouth of a river, along a river. And it was rainy season, and it just kept raining and raining. Or it was springtime, and it was just rainy and rainy every day. And he got tired of it, so they lived in a little place, and there was a cache, you know, where they stored their food right outside their house. And he runs in and he goes, and right above his grandma, who's just sitting there in their house, is a drum, like a little drum hanging there. And he walks inside and he said, Grandma, what is that? What does that drum do hanging above you all the time? She goes, oh, it just hangs there. And he said, could you use it to change the weather? And then she said, okay. So she takes it down. She takes down her little drum. And she said, but one thing, when I'm done drumming, you're going to run outside and you're going to go check on the weather. She said, if it changes at all, you let me know right away. He's like, okay, I could do that. So she starts drumming, and she says, ang iugat, ang guha, at kaling maliga ka, puyumita ka, suga, kitagkamani. I don't know the song, it's kind of like a chant, I don't know the words to it, but at the end it says, kitagkamani, hurry up and run outside. So he runs outside and he looks at the weather, and it had been raining before, right? Really lots, and he looked out, and it cleared up. It cleared up. It wasn't foggy anymore. It wasn't rainy, and he could see their little cache, and so he closed the door and runs inside. And then she says, did it change, grandchild? And he said, no, it hasn't changed. She said, okay, kita ka makumi. So she starts drumming again, thinking it didn't change, and she's singing the same song. Ang iugat, guha, at kaling maliga ka, puyumta ka, suga, kitagkamani. So he runs outside and he looks out, and it's so nice and sunny. And across the river are hills, and he could see caribou roaming and eating across there. It's just really warm, like in the middle of summer, right? And he's like feeling a little stuffed, but he runs inside and he goes, Grandma, it hasn't changed. Drum again. So she said, okay. So she starts singing and drumming again, that same song. Ang iugat, gaha, at kaling maliga ka, puyumuta ka, suga, kitagkamani. And she runs outside. He runs outside and he opens the door, and it's burning. It's a fire outside. And it's just coming right up to their house. It had already burned down their little cache, and it's just encroaching. So he runs back and he says, Grandma, stop drumming. It's burning out there. And it had got to their house, and they could feel the heat, and Grandma said, I thought I told you to tell me as soon as it changes. Hurry up. And so she takes her little bag, her ishan, and she digs around in it, and she pulls out 2 weasel skins. And she throws the other weasel skin to her grandson, and she said, take it and chew on the inside of it for a little bit. Put a little bit of saliva on it, and then put it on. So he quickly does that, and then they both put it on, and the fire's in their house by now, and they start digging the side. And right when they get through, they're almost through, the tips of their tails get singed. And that's why weasels have a little tip, brown tip at their tails.
Wait,
Huh?
there are weasels
Yeah. Or they put on weasel skins and they transformed into weasels. That's what I think. They were quickly put them on, so, yeah. I used to tell my students, I think it was one day where the weather changed the next day to be like really stormy. I was like, we changed the weather yesterday. And they're like, oh, from telling that. Any questions?
That kind of reminds me of when we were kids, our parents used to tell us not to bring our dolls outside because the weather would change.
Yeah, it would get bad.
Yeah.
There's an even story about that.
I think like if you bring it outside, it becomes, in the winter time, it becomes spring-like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. If you, or what happened in that story of that one, these girls were playing with their dolls outside. And I even tell my girls this to this day, you're not bringing your dolls out. But they brought their...
We were always told not to bring our dolls out in the winter time.
Yeah, at all. And when they played with their dolls in secret outside, and after they did that, it had turned into spring, right? And then after that, there was a huge blizzard that covered this village, just this village, the surrounding village. And so the shaman had no choice in searching for those girls that possibly did that, so they brought them to the qazgi. And it's a bad, I don't want to tell the story. The repercussions were really bad, you know. I can't tell that one. That one stays in my pocket. The repercussions were really bad.
It's like that story we were telling on the mud this morning. Then we said that we couldn't tell that story, so we can't tell that one.
Yeah, it's for more mature adults, I think.
Can you tell me later?
I could tell you the baby with the big mouth. That's a scary story. You want to tell that one?
Everyone always wants to hear about that one.
Yeah.
Where the baby's mouth like just
Like 90-degree angles.
I'll tell you the story. It's a good story.
its mother from the inside out. I don't know.
Yeah. He remembers. Yeah, what was your question?
My question, I think it was down south, somewhere on the plains, but there was talk of a rock baby. Is that some,
Rock baby.
Yeah, well, rock baby is actually, a demon, but anyways.
Yee.
So, my question is, do you have, is there a lot of stories about, babies, too?
In general?
Yeah, in general.
Not really. That one is the one that kind of resonates with a lot of people, and it's actually a story that not only we tell, but other parts of the Arctic all over tell it, even in Canada. The version of that baby with the big mouth story, and maybe even in the Aleutians. So it's really widespread. But babies in general. There are, like you said, there's rocks. It just reminded me, there was a rock on Nelson Island. This elder said it looked exactly like a woman holding a baby, on her back. And the legend is that the lice flew off with them and dropped them there. But people give offerings to certain rocks of significance like that.
There's a rock in Togiak called Sleeping Lady.
Yeah.
Not Sleeping Lady. What is it called? Is it Sleeping Lady? Anugakdak.
Anugakdak, yeah. I've heard of Anugakdak, and you'll see a lot of cash and all kinds of stuff around Anugakdak for probably a good subsistence season, fishing season, or anything. People give it offerings. I want to go see it. Anugakdak.
And she used to have a baby on her back too.
Yeah, and they said at one point it just looked like a real person, but nobody had made it, nobody had sculpted
She
it.
had a
A
bowl.
bowl.
In her hand. Sometimes it would have fish swimming inside it.
When seasons are going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anugakdak. I forgot the name. Yeah, but the baby with the big mouth. Who knows what shamans are? You guys know what shamans are?
Medicine people.
Yeah, medicine people. And in our culture, they were one of the most important people in the communities before Christianity arrived, and they kind of stopped practicing their healing and then magic. They did both healing and magic. There were good ones, there were bad ones. But so the way that the baby with the big mouth starts is there was once this family, and in that family, the parents wanted their daughter to have a baby because she kept losing all her babies. Back then it was very common to lose a lot of kids because we didn't have hospitals, we didn't have medicine, we didn't have modern things. So the parents wanted their daughter's baby to live. And when that happens, when you keep having babies die, you could go to a shaman and you could ask, the parents asked him, can you not do anything to make this baby to make the baby live, inside her? Because they were tired of being disappointed of not having a grandkid. And so the shaman said, bring her to the qazgi. And so the qazgi is a men's house, and it's circular shaped. I don't know how many of you have been into the one at the Heritage Center, maybe, the Yupik qazgi, the big one. Yeah, it's circular. So they brought her in there where most of the ceremonies took place, and he did a ceremony on her. And after a while, of doing her ceremony, he said, Qayumi. It's like, Qayumi. That's all he said. And then after it was done, he went to the parents and said, I did a little too much, doctoring. I did a little too much. So when this baby is born, no matter how the baby looks, make sure you show it to people. It'll become normal. If you show it to people, do not hide it at all, no matter how it looks. So they went home, the parents and the daughter, and it was time to have the baby. And so they made a little area for her in the corner of the house with a partition. And so for privacy, she had her baby in there. A lot of times women had their babies alone back then. It was a different time. So she had her baby, and right when the baby was born, she wrapped it up and she held on to it. And even though the mom and the parents went over there, opened the doors, she just wouldn't even show them the baby. She just refused to show anyone, not even her parents who lived in the same house. So this took place, according to the elder that told it to me, at Qadr-Yashkuhumut. Qadr-Yashkuhumut was next to Akichuk. You guys know where Akichuk is? Near Bethel? But it was right in that area. So they were from the Kuskokwim. That family was from the Kuskokwim. And then so time went on, and they could hear baby noises back in the partition and everything, but they didn't see no baby. So one day, the mom walked out to go pee outside, and so the grandma quickly, they were sleeping, her and her husband, walked over there and opened the partition, the little, I don't know what you, curtain, and she opened it and looked down, and there was the baby. It had a mouth from ear to ear, just all the way down. And when she looked down at it, it was only a few months old. The baby looked at her like it was completely aware. Like not how babies are like, when they're first born or whatever. This baby just looked right at her and opened its mouth, and it had little sharp teeth all the way down and across, and it looked like it was like fully
Demonic?
Yeah, well, not, I don't know what demonic, but aware, like it knew what it was doing. So she heard her daughter, so she quickly closed it and walked over and she laid down. And that same night, she woke up from sleeping and she could hear a crunching noise. That's how the elders described it. So she quietly walked over there and she looked inside, and the baby had already eaten through the mom's chest cavity all the way through. It had eaten all its parts and she was dead, and she just quietly closed that curtain and walked over to her husband and said, "We gotta go right now." They took whatever they could and they ran out and they went to every house in that village quietly, as quiet, because it was still eating the mom and it didn't even notice. So they alerted everyone. They got together and they took off as a whole group and they headed for the Yukon. They headed for the Yukon and they traveled all night that night and all day, and then finally when it was time to rest, they were in between the Kuskokwim and the Yukon. There was like a portage there. And they stopped there. One of the men went up, told everyone. He said, "I left my knife. I need my knife." You guys know how rare knives were and uloks were back then? They were
like made of ivory and all that.
They were made out of obsidian or rock that's really sharp, and that our whole area, well, not our whole area, most of our region is covered. There's no rocks. I mean, you have to remember how rare those things are. He said, "I need my knife, you know. Can you?" And he went up to the fast runner and he said, "Can you run back and get my knife?" Because he's the only one that can run fast, right? And so he ran all the way back from that camp, and he went all the way back. And when he got to the village, on the outskirts of the village, he hid and looked through, and all of a sudden, as he was looking out of, because houses had a window up on top, like a
Like
air hole, yeah, because they
Yeah.
cook too, but there's a sky hole up there. So the baby just jumped out of that window and started crawling, like jumped out, and it would say, "Kia, kia, kia," your name, and then it would say, "Anakashi, nukakashi, Anakashi," and it means my mother, I ate her, and it would just crawl. But he looked closer and he saw that it was hovering a little above the snow, like it wasn't actually, right on the ground, but it was just skidding along really, really fast, and it would go into another house. And then as he was watching, it jumped out again through the skylight, and he would say, "Kia, kia, anakashi, nakakashi." And right when it was about to go into another house, he knew where the man's knife was, so he ran quickly across while it was in that house, and he looked out, and it came out and went into another house. He was just going through all the houses looking for anybody, and right when he came out, the baby, when he ran back to the spot where he was at, the baby happened to see him, and it started coming toward him. So he ran as fast as he could, and he ran, and he knew that baby wasn't going to stop probably until it got to him. So on his way, he had seen caribou tracks, like, you know how caribou run in herds and there are just thousands of them? So he got an idea and he started following the caribou tracks up into the mountains. And when he got to a certain part, he turned and he cut across to his old trail. So the baby followed those tracks and it was never heard from again. But the elder who told the story said that when something bad's going to happen in that village, they could hear that baby sometimes. Like somebody will hear it, it'll say, "Anakashi, nakakashi, anakashi." So, the spirit of that baby is probably still around. But they moved to the Yukon. They stayed there for how many years. They were so scared, but they came back to their village. So some of the descendants of that group are still in the Yukon River area.
Why couldn't the ancestors or like all the villagers just like burn the house down or anything like that, and just like run like afterwards, like rather than burn the house? Why couldn't they just do that?
I don't know. You know, they had certain beliefs back then too, and just burning a house down would not be good, probably. You know.
Well, they're like the village anyway. Like, you can create a new life beyond this village. Burn the house down. What they do?
Yeah, there's lots of possibilities, but to know that that story, survived to this point is pretty cool, and that it's so widespread. Even in the Canadian Arctic, they tell a version of it. So, any other comments or questions?
There's a map if you want it.
Oh yeah, you could set it out. Yeah. So the dark blue area, Bethel is right here where I'm from right now. But I lived here for 20 years before that. But I'm from Napakiak, which is downriver from Bethel. That's where I grew up because my grandparents raised me. And so this whole area right here, it's really, really rich, and it's a very rich area. I mean, people don't think it is. They think it's just flat, tundra, treeless, whatever. But in terms of the food that we have out there, it's very rich. And all the waterfowl that we get, the animals, the moose, caribou is kind of down right now, but it's a really rich area. And the cool part about it is there's still kids speaking Yukton in their native language in some of the villages. And so, yeah. And it probably is the most heavily, look at all the villages there are. There's so many. It's the most heavily populated area in all of the rest of Alaska, I think, the Yupik region, because it's such a rich area. The Yukon River mouth and the Kuskokwim River mouth come out right there, and they're deltas, and so much salmon, so much herring, it's just amazing. I mean, people say bad things about living in Bethel, but you won't go hungry there. I'm kidding. But any other comments or?
Like, why did the shaman do like too much doctoring?
Well, I think sometimes we're not in control of everything. That's how I think about it, and even as somebody as powerful as a shaman can make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are irreversible. But I always think, the reason why he told her, why did he tell her, do not show the baby? I mean, do not hide the baby. Show the baby.
Probably to make it irreversible.
Yeah, you think so?
Probably because it happened before.
Yeah, and they know. Yeah.
Or so like the baby wouldn't be smiling if she like showed the kid to everyone. It wouldn't be smiling or anything like that. So maybe it could be that. I don't know.
Yeah. Or if it probably, I was thinking when I was a kid and I'd hear this story, was that would come back to normal, if she showed it. Yeah?
Yeah, if it was around for people and people treated her as a normal child, it would go back to normal child.
Yeah,
Just
that's a good
what
point.
I think of it as like Pinocchio.
Like who? Pinocchio. Yeah, that's a good one.
They have to treat him like a normal boy or make him feel like it's a normal boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of
Maybe
similarities.
shaman was trying to teach him to not be so judgmental of how you look and to not be shameful of what your baby looks like.
Yeah, not to be ashamed, yeah. Yep. So that's a good lesson, I think.
So, did the baby like
eat them all because the grandma like wouldn't look at it?
I think that might have triggered it too, you know? I think, you know, because sometimes, imagine the baby hasn't seen nothing except the mom, and the mom is just hiding it and keeping it in a corner for how long? It's never seen anybody. And so I think it was a trigger. What do you think? I think a lot of these stories too, they really make you think. They get you thinking about things and how different life was back then, but also similar in some ways, in a lot of ways. Well, how many of you have heard about Ichtinhuks? Ichtinhuks? Yeah? You guys know what Ichtinhuks are?
I think so.
Oh, little people?
Yeah.
Now
Oh, I didn't know what that was. I was like, until
Yeah.
he said little people, I was like, yeah, I hear a lot of stories from my grandma.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my mom and Judd, he told stories about little people.
Yeah. How many have you
what's the
you
difference
heard?
between Singsi and Ichtinhuks?
Ichtinhuks are
They eat
no. Ichtinhuks are any non-human person that has an ability to change form. Yeah, a lot of young people always say shapeshift. You think of shapeshifters. They're any being that can turn from human to animal, and it can even be a place. A place can be a Ichtinhuk in that it has the power and ability to hold people there. Ichtinhuks have the power and ability to change and transform your surroundings or make you see differently. Those are Ichtinhuks. Jinxiks are a type of Ichtinhuk because they have powers and abilities we don't have. Jinxiks are little people, almost like gnomes, you know? And
I thought they were evil.
they can be naughty.
Don't they play games with you, and if you lose, they keep you forever?
Oh, no, but they mess around with people. They play games and
And then they kind of
They're mischief.
they're mischief. Yeah, that's the best
Like
term. Yeah, Ichtinhuks. But they can also shorten your trail. Like if you're traveling from one village to the other and it takes about 2 hours, you can get there really fast because they can make that happen. They can shorten their trail or they can make it longer. Like a place that you get to in 20 minutes, they'll make you get there in like 4 hours or even more, or even let you run out of gas. And there's some people that are tied, like if they're traveling by snow machine. This elder told me he was traveling and it was windy too at the same time, and he was like, why am I not getting there? He thought he was running, and then all of a sudden he looked down and he went like this, and he wasn't going. He put his foot down and he wasn't even traveling. But he opened his gas and it was already pretty much gone. So he was going, you know. So there's some strange things that happen that you have to be completely aware of when you're traveling by snow machine or by vehicles, by car out, and things can happen. And so be aware of your surroundings. My boss, my old boss, he said there's this place close to my village. We were always scared of it. We call it Lonely Hill. And it's this, everywhere is flat except this place. It's like a bluff, you know? It's like a big, big bluff. And then next to it is this very, very shallow lake. We call it Piss Me Off Lake. But it's called Jikiyakin. And it's in Lu Maravik Slu. But now there's a way for people to get through that, to get to places where they can berry pick and hunt and subsist. But it just makes people mad when they get stuck in it with outboard motors, and because that's how we travel at home, you know, by boat and by motor. So anyway, I heard stories where Ichtinhuks little people were hunting a beluga on that shallow, shallow lake. You know, they actually hunted a beluga, and a person who was traveling through there by kayak actually saw this beluga surfacing and going down, and these ichtinhaks hunting with kayaks. And then, but that's what I grew up hearing, that you'll see things there that you normally wouldn't see at all. And then one day there was an ichtinhak who was kayaking, and he was dragging a log in the back of his kayak, and a regular person like us saw him. And they say if you see a ichtinhak, try to run after it and grab whatever you can from it, because it will give you the ability to acquire something, or an ability to be a good hunter, or maybe a magical ability, I don't know. But you could do that. But he was towing a large log through there, and he went right into that bluff face, right on the side of the bluff, and he pulled that log, and the person who was quickly kayaking after it touched the log, and the log got stuck there. So on the side of this bluff used to be just a big end of a log sticking out, you know, and nobody knew, like, how did it get there, but that was the story. But my boss's friend brought his family to go berry picking there. And, you know, it's like a hour-and-a-half trip from Bethel, down the river, through that slough, get there. And it was night by the time they got there, so they set up camp. They set up their tents and everything, and they went to bed. And in the middle of the night, he needed to pee, so he walked out, and, you know, he was sleepy, he was about to pee, and the lake was right there. And he looked at the lake, and there was a cruise ship. And he was like, what is going on? He got really scared. He quickly finished peeing, walked in, went to bed. The next day, the next morning, he woke up his family. He said, "We're leaving. We're not camping here. Who cares about all the berries there are here? We're not staying here." So they encounter things like that with Ichthys.
Is it an actual cruise ship or like?
It was a ship with lots and lots of lights, and they also say that Ichtinhaks can show you what will happen in the future. So my boss said, you know, sometimes they'll show you places that don't exist by having lights. You guys ever heard of people that see lights out?
Yeah,
in-
like UFOs kind of thing.
Yeah, almost like UFOs. Some
like
of them are
circle.
dancing, yeah.
Oh,
Some of them are unexplained lights.
That like float around.
Yeah, that float. Or there'll be lights where there's no village at all.
Like the concept of will-o'-the-wisps in like Brave and stuff.
Yeah, have you seen that movie? It's a
Oh,
Disney
oh
movie.
yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's little souls with little activities.
Mhm. Yeah. So people still see Ichtinhaks out there. But there was this recently, it was in the newspaper too, there was this kid, I think it was in Marshall. And forgive me if I leave out any of the details, because I keep track of stories that are told today and stories that were told from thousands ago. But this is a recent story. This kid was playing outside this elder's house. And this elder's son and grandson were out hunting birds in the springtime. They come, and there's still snow on the ground. It's still icy, but the birds arrived, and so they're hunting. And they're about to go makik, you guys, steam bath. And they walked by the kid and said, "Hey kid, go home. You know, go home. It's getting late, like 11 at night, but it's still bright in the spring, so it's hard to go home, right?" But anyway, this kid, they forgot about him. They went back home from their makik, and then the elder's son came in, and he said, "Hey," he said, "Dad, I came across this kid about 4 miles outside, 3-4 miles outside of their village, just on a trail. He was just standing there. And I asked him, 'What are you doing out here?' And he said, I don't know. And so he said, get on my snow machine. So he put him on his snow machine. He was looking for he was meeting his son, but he said, forget about that. Let me take this kid home. So he brought him all the way home, dropped him where he should be, and went back and got his son. But that kid said that as he was playing outside, these two guys appeared and said, come with me, come with me. So he started walking with them, right? And after a while, he's like, this is kind of shady. That's what I'm thinking, like, this is weird. So he tried to turn around, but he'd bump into something. Like, there's no way for him to go back. So he just kept going with the guy, and he brought him inside this place, and it was like a underground dwelling, and there were people inside it, lots of people. But this girl came up to him inside that place and said, my name is Della, May, I think was her name, and said, when you go back home, tell everybody I said hi, I live here now. This is where I'm kept. And then that boy somehow, usually they keep you in there. That's what I hear. Ichtinhuks can bring you underground and keep you in their world. But they let him go for some reason. And usually there's always a reason they let somebody go. But when he got home, he told the people about that Della. He said, there's a girl named Della in there. And they said, what? So in the 50s, this girl named Della disappeared completely from their village, and this boy wouldn't have known her name or known of her.
Oh.
Her and her friend had been playing outside of the post office, and her friend on that day, she was the only one because she didn't play with her for that one day, and she just completely disappeared. So that's a recent Ichtinhak story. So just beware that there's...
So is that like the place in or like the little people?
They're like, little people. The Ichtinhak.
So how small are they? Are really small or like, I don't know.
There's Jingsigat, there's Gachohit, but the regular Ichtinhaks I hear are not that short. But some of them can be tiny too, because somebody showed like sled tracks of Ichtinhaks with little footprints by them, and there's different kinds, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was imagining like Lego
Some of them I think they are.
And I was imagining like Lego size hunting a beluga whale, and I was like, wait, that doesn't look or sound right.
And the beluga whale's like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't belong to the lake.
Yeah. Well, the one I was thinking that they're like about that big.
Yeah.
Like maybe
kindergarten.
Yeah, like kindergarten size. Yeah.
Maybe you
So
could just
is it
pick
like
them.
Ichtinhak
Go for
beluga
the-
whale? Like a small one?
No, it was a regular sized one in that shallow lake. So it was coming up, going down, and it was a regular sized one.
So
I can't see it.
And they're strong. That's how they're able to hunt them and keep them. They're stronger than normal human beings.
But they're smaller.
They're smaller, but they're very strong. They have.
they can like carry like mini plane like plus sizes of them like on them. Just one person can carry like 20 like other ones can carry like that much. Like I don't know.
Maybe.
So how tall are like the average, like you said earlier, like how tall are like the average ones, I guess?
Well, I heard there's Ichtinhaks that are probably kid size. Those are the ones that bring you underground and you see them. And then sometimes when they bring you underground, the way I imagine in the stories is they're as big as regular people. There was once this guy that was brought into the Ichtinhak world they'll show you 3 doorways. They'll say, here's you can choose between these 3 doorways which way you want to exit after they bring you in. They'll say there's a top door, there's a middle door, and there's a bottom door. You know, but if you go through the middle, that's our world. If you go through the top, you're going to be stuck in the you're going to be stuck up there. And then if you go on the bottom one, you're going to be stuck under our world. So they often give you those 3 choices in stories of which door you want to use, but you should use the middle. Yeah, the middle doorway. But any other kind of stories you're interested in hearing?
Do you have any more?
Oh, the little people stories?
Do you have any more?
Yeah, well, a more recent one, there was this guy who went to, you guys know what Slavic is?
What?
Slavic, the Russian Orthodox Christmas?
Yes.
Yeah, Slavic.
Yeah.
So he went by truck from Bethel to Nunap to go to attend the Slavic in Gasigaluk or Nunap. And either he was coming back from those 2 villages in the middle of the night or he was heading that way, I can't remember. But the Ichin Hux, all of a sudden as he was driving along, his brother told a story, and they're in their 50s, 60s, right? He's driving along, these 2 Ichin Hux, these little guys wearing fur parkas and little malachais. No, they weren't wearing a hat, but this guy had those Russian malachais hats, fur hats.
Yeah.
But he was wearing one of those, and these 2 Ichin Hux all of a sudden got into his truck as he was going, like just walked in, sat down, and they were just making mischief all over. They were making, and they'd grab his hat, they'd put it on. They were just messing with him, and he was getting really desperate because as he was going at the same time, like his trail, like he was off trail, and then he'd go, and he kind of got disoriented at the same time because these 2 Ichin Hux were messing with him. And after a while, there's a hill right there, like they're said to live in like hilly areas. So this hill opened up and his truck was heading toward it. And but right before he got to it, it just suddenly closed. So he was able to make it out of that situation. But they stole his malachai. That's what I heard, that after a while they stole his malachai. So there's encounters like that where you really do see them.